The agenda this week examined the ripple effects of what's known as the Supreme Court's Jordan decision. Logged into the forestry industry sector in Ontario, studied a changing capital city through one of its public schools, and heard about how a little extra help getting that first job can make a world of difference. The agenda's Week in Review begins with a look at ageism in the workplace. This notion of mandatory retirement at age 65 is kind of a quaint old notion. So let's start with this. How have employers adjusted to this new reality?
I think that employers are slow to adjusting to the new reality. I think from a policy perspective, career paths, looking at training plans, even the language we use about the older worker and the aging workforce is out of date and reinforces that there's this goalpost that everyone's working towards at age 65.
Well, get specific about that then. If we were talking about older workers today, what are we talking about? What age?
Well, so when the retirement age was set at 65, it was the 30s and life expectancy was only 62. So if we're going to talk about the older worker, you know, the retirement policies when they were originally brought in were really policies for the aged. So my question back would be, you know, why are we putting workplace policies for the aged for a population that's nowhere near being aged yet?
So obviously you're suggesting we ought to forget about retiring at 65, you know, by requirement, and should start to think about working for how long?
Well, there's some really interesting policy that's coming out of the U.S. Some economists there have said instead of looking at birth forward to set a date of when you no longer are going to be useful in the workforce, let's look at death backwards. Let's have everyone age in their own way. And aging starts, I'm aging, my 14-year-old is aging, everyone's aging. But let's age and let's put policies in place to help people when they actually need to start the true dictionary definition of the word to retire, to withdraw, to conclude. That's what the word means. It doesn't mean having a 30-year vacation.
So if we're going to, that's an interesting way to put it. So if we're going to put policies in place, let's start from the assumption that on average people are going to live 80 plus years and then work backwards from there.
Correct.
I think what we're really going through right now is a post-mandatory retirement reality where a lot of employers make assumptions, and they've designed their management systems based on there being turnover at age 60, 65. And the reality is that that's not necessarily when people choose to retire at all, based on choice in many cases and necessity in many others. And so assumptions that you're gone at 65 are still out there. The management systems are still there. The assumptions of supervisors, the plans for renewal and so on, all of those things are premised on something which changed when mandatory retirement went out.
How do you see it, Stephanie?
Well, I think that mandatory retirement at age 65 or 60, whatever the rule is kind of I wouldn't call it the least of the concerns, but what I've seen in my practice and working with Challenge Factory is there's a lot of people who are much younger than 60 or 65 who are having to reinvent and reimagine their careers. And it can be very difficult if the perception is we don't want to invest in someone who, and it's a myth, but we don't want to invest in someone who's going to leave. If you look at the average tenure, that shouldn't be an issue. And I think that it puts a lot of stress on people. If you think about the gap, you know, when the supports come in, if you are changing careers in your early 50s and finding it difficult and having to take time to find something new or different or another position, or you have to change the type of work you do, that's a long gap between, say, 52 and 67, you know, what happens between 52 and 67? And that's one of the things that we're trying to help with is let's find meaningful things for people to do. There's a shocking amount of talent that's left on the table, lying around, people with incredible skills, experience, judgment, and they're just on the periphery having a really hard time trying to find their way in.
Because of ageism? Because
of ageism, and also because of the way people are selected for work, and there's a whole process around keywords, and it's more technical. People need support to find new work. And I think that there are a number of factors at play, but what you find is people in their 50s and 60s with incredible experience, great insights, they've got people skills, they've got management skills, they've got good judgment, and they're finding it hard to find a role. And I think companies probably would like to have them, but I don't think they've figured out how do we find these people and how do we change the way we do things so that we can take advantage of the talent.
You want to pick up on that?
I do. I think that there's a lot of myths that are out there that drive employers to make bad choices or to actually not even have the information that they need to know that they're making a choice. And I also think that there are so many elements of the world of work that are changing all at the same time. Demographics and aging is one component of what we're seeing change, but we're also seeing a change to freelance economy, new employment structures, new reviews of old policies. And I think as all of these changes are taking place at the same time, sometimes it can get confusing and things get left by the sides.
Presumably you looked out at the workforce and you ran into a situation where at 58 people are not necessarily open to, right?
No.
They're not welcoming.
No,
So what'd you do about it?
especially at that level. So I had to reinvent myself, and the thing that gets very tricky is if you find yourself, in your 50s or even in your 60s, and we didn't. My husband ran his own business. I don't have a pension. He doesn't have a pension. I want to work, and I still feel I have a lot to contribute, but. You have to find something to do, and it takes time. So a lot of people, even when they're reinventing their careers, they have to build in that time to switch gears. And probably the most difficult thing is a sense of identity and confidence. Kind of being unmoored, if you've been used to being in the harness, is hard for most people, and most people don't expect it, and it can absolutely wreak havoc. And people, I've had clients who have incredibly good qualifications who spent 2 years, in their early to mid 50s looking to reestablish, to get another job.
Let me follow up with Lisa on that, because as workers get older and they start to feel marginalized because they don't have that superstar place in the workplace they used to have, what does that do to them?
Yeah, so it's really challenging. The whole identity issue that Stephanie was just referring to is really one of the most significant challenges that they face internally. The external ageism that's taking place in the workplace only is kind of a self-reinforcing circle that they have to deal with. But it's very difficult to realize that you are all of a sudden a previously important person, that the only way that you can introduce yourself at cocktail parties is in the past tense. I used to be the director of, I used to be. That's not a healthy way to be able to look ahead, especially when, as we've been saying, it's not a short period of time that you have. It's long enough to be able to make a significant transition. So really thinking through separating what I do with who I am is something that it's particularly tricky, and it's particularly tricky for Canadians. Canadians introduce themselves with their job title more than almost any other country on the planet. Other places may use where they went to school or where they grew up or what sports team they have allegiance to, but we use our job. And so when that's all of a sudden no longer true, it's very disheartening, and it's unsettling for many people.
Have you seen situations so far, given these new tighter timelines, where people charged with extremely serious crimes have simply been allowed to walk out of the courtroom because the judge, in his or her wisdom, believes that you have not met a speedy deliberation of justice?
We know that there are certainly 4 murder cases that have been stayed pursuant to Jordan.
In what province?
1 in Ontario, 1 in Alberta, and I believe 2 in Quebec. We've had serious child abuse case stayed in Ontario involving a 2-week-old whose ankles were broken. We have had a sexual assault of a 3-year-old stayed due to Jordan. Those are the cases that I think would grab the most attention. But as I said, impaired driving, there are a lot of impaired driving charges tend to get caught on 11Bs. And the whole wide range of the criminal code is going to be subject to this.
And let's just understand what this means. Stayed, does that mean, it doesn't mean innocent, or it doesn't mean not guilty, but does it mean you walk out, we're done, and we can't come back at you?
It's done. And I think it's the worst of all worlds for everybody, because the complainant, the victim, does not have the opportunity to have their day in court. The public doesn't get the opportunity to hear all of the evidence on issues of serious public interest. An accused person doesn't get their chance either to have their day in court, and there may be a defense there that they don't get to present. And so I think probably the public perception is they were guilty and got off.
Well, but, okay, I don't want to speak for you, but do I infer that you're just as happy to have the charges stayed and have the guy walk out?
It really depends on the case. Legally speaking, it's
what you
the
want.
same.
Yeah.
He walks free, there are no conditions, but in the one Ontario case that Kate just mentioned, where a defendant in a murder case was released, the judge made a point of saying in her decision, this is a bit of a hollow victory for the defendant as well. He goes through life now with the label of suspected murderer, and he doesn't get a chance to hear a jury come back in and say not guilty, which was a very real possible result.
The Supreme Court, I think, also said that if you Crowns could prove exceptional circumstances, quote unquote, you can pass that 18-month or 30-month deadline. So what does that mean, exceptional circumstances?
I think it remains to be seen what that means, because as happens pretty much with every decision of the Supreme Court, it then filters down, and every trial level decision is going to try and apply the analysis from the Supreme Court to the facts of their case. So I think we're going to have to wait and see how the courts interpret that. You would think that might mean one of those big prosecutions where you have multiple accused, or you have a huge amount of technological kind of evidence, digital evidence, wiretapping, all of those things that can make a trial particularly complicated. But I don't think we know yet.
Megan, how often have you gone to court, said to the judge, Your Honor, this is a classic case of Jordan. They've taken too long. I'm not even going to introduce a defense. Let him go.
So I wish it were that easy.
Okay. I'm watching too much TV, I guess. Eh?
Honestly, I have to say,
speed things up.
Yeah, no, it's true. In some cases, the cases that are over the ceiling, it's a really easy thing to do. Now, you can say, look, it's over the ceiling. It's on the Crown now to explain why. But what has become less common, and these are a lot of my cases, are trials that have taken, in my view, too long. So a simple assault case in the Ontario Court of Justice, one-day trial, should be dealt with in a matter of months. All the disclosure should have been available on the first court appearance. It's now taken maybe 15, 16 months due to unacceptable conduct, let's say, on the part of the institution or the Crown. It's under the ceiling, and so now the test on me is actually much more onerous. And my advice to my client has changed. I no longer tell that client who's been waiting 16 months to bring an 11B application because it's not nearly as certain that it would succeed.
Okay. Trial by jury. If we had fewer trials by jury, would things go faster?
Yes.
So should we do that?
Not necessarily. We do.
It's never simple.
It's never simple. The Crown regularly agrees to a defense request to go judge alone. But the big exception would be on homicides. From the Crown perspective, those cases that are the most serious of the criminal code, there is a real public interest, of course, in those cases. The principle of a trial by a jury of your peers, is a really important one. And from our perspective, those most serious of cases, like a homicide, should still be heard by a jury, except in very rare circumstances.
What's your view on that, Megan?
I disagree with that. It's the defendant's right to a trial by jury, and he's the one charged with murder. If he wants a judge alone, particularly if he has a narrow legal defense, he should be entitled to that, and it could free up weeks of court time. So
we should not bring in new rules or conventions saying, if this is the case, then you're allowed to have a trial by jury. If not, forget it.
No, I would say if you're going to change the rule that requires him to have a jury trial in a homicide case.
How about preliminary hearings? We've seen, again, the Attorney General, Yasser Naqvi, suggest that maybe there are some times when you don't need to have a prelim and therefore go straight to trial. That'll save some time. Is he right about that?
No. I think
you just disagreed with the Attorney General of Ontario on television.
I did. He'll probably watch.
He might watch. You never know.
I think that is a Band-Aid solution, and it's premised on this idea that I'm not sure is right, that if you go for a preliminary hearing and then a trial in Superior Court, you get 30 months. But if you don't go for a preliminary hearing and then a trial in Superior Court, you still get 30 months. So to me, the idea of abandoning the preliminary hearing is just a way of taking advantage of the high ceiling without all of the procedural steps that justified the ceiling in the first place.
And what's the value of the prelim to begin with?
A couple of things. So it's no longer as useful as a tool for figuring out the Crown's case. It used to be we didn't know the Crown's case until we went to a prelim. Now we do. Nowadays, it's much more useful for filtering out the cases that never should go to trial in the first place. It's the first chance for an independent third party to look at the case and say, yes, that's good enough to go to trial, or no, it isn't. In Ontario, right now, it's the police, and now with a little bit more Crown involvement, who make the decision about whether to lay the charge. The defendant should be entitled at the earliest opportunity to have a judge weigh in on whether they made the right choice.
What's your view on that, Kate?
I think if you asked 100 Crowns their view on the value of a preliminary hearing, you would get maybe 50 different answers. There are times when I think they should certainly be more circumscribed. So we can narrow the issues, we can make them more efficient. I have done preliminary hearings where I've benefited as well from the Crown, from hearing from the witnesses and getting a chance to test the case as well. So,
meaning once you've heard what you've heard, maybe you've dropped the charges or something like that?
Yes, or we think maybe there's a good resolution here that we may not have thought of or was appropriate in the earlier stages.
Today, for our industry, with the embattlement with the U.S. and softwood lumber, for our industry specifically today, it's more about the federal government coming forward with loan guarantees for our companies to survive. And this is what we talked about. Our employees are working in our mills again. Ontario's wood has been put back to work. We're getting to our stride again from the recession. And if the federal government doesn't come through with some type of loan guarantee to level the playing field and keep our operations running and bring the U.S. back to the table to negotiate a fair deal rather than just any deal. Any deal.
Explain that to me. You need a loan guarantee because what does that do?
Well, if you look at the cash deposits on the lumber duties on every shipment we put into the U.S., that will drain very quickly the resources financially from the companies all across Canada that have to pay them. And the last fight went on for 4 years. We're talking billions of dollars that are taken out of the revenue stream. As I said, we're just coming back from the recession, and nobody's balance sheet on the Canadian forestry side is anywhere close to where it was in the last fight.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion here? Ready for this graphic here, Sheldon? You alluded earlier to the fact that while we may not make as much noise, you folks in forestry, as some of the other sectors of the economy, maybe here's why. Okay, shall we compare trees and cars? The auto industry directly employs more than 100,000 people in the province. It's estimated to stimulate 311,000 additional jobs. The value of auto exports is 30% higher than those from agriculture, food manufacturing, forestry, mining, and primary metals combined. Does that right there, Tom, not explain why when car companies get in trouble, they have the ear of politicians in a way that you don't?
Yeah, that is it. And that's, I think, what we want to remind everybody in Southern Ontario and the governments is that we are the auto industry of the North. And without that, who's going to send the lumber into the Greater Toronto area to build the homes and all that? That's what we do in the North. And if this fight with the U.S. trade battle or whatever, if it was the auto industry in Southern Ontario, it would be right front and center very, very quickly, and both levels of government would be standing there helping the industry. So, and that's all we've asked for.
Do you think that politicians don't realize that enough?
No, I believe that the majority of them do, and our province, our government, is looking to the federal government to lead on this file because it's a federal file. It's a trade dispute, and they're looking at Ottawa to put loan guarantees in place to maintain these companies in Ontario and across Canada, so the employees keep working in that industry and we keep surviving. That's the key.
Georgianne, you've got a policy idea that you'd like to throw out there that you think would make things work better?
Oh, I think both of them, raised both two really critical policies. I was going back to the Endangered Species Act, and looking at that more from a sustainability perspective, and that we, going back to us being the stewards of the land. I mean, we know how to manage our forests. We don't just take from the forest; what we take, we put back. And the same goes for the Indigenous communities that I work with and that our company works with, because we can manage our forests, we can manage our land sustainably, and we can do it in a responsible manner. We do not need anybody to dictate how to do that. What we need is more of a collectivity approach and people working together. That means government at the table and industry at the table to sit down and really make sure these policies are relevant to the needs of the communities, in which in our case is up in the northwestern Ontario. So we need to really understand what the impacts of these types of policies are, because again, we are concerned about endangered species. Yes. We're not, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder if you have a communications problem here. I wonder if you got a PR problem, because I mean, clearly north of the French River, people understand the importance of forestry to the whole dynamism of the economy. I wonder if people south of the French River see you guys as the stewards of our land that you say you are. I think south of the French River, people may think, oh yeah, you're the guys who, you know, cut trees down but don't necessarily replant them, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. You want to take that one on?
Goodness. Well, and you know what? And you could be right, but the thing is it's just not true. Like I said, what we take, we put back. And we have communities who are actively engaged and working in that industry and silviculture to make sure that their reforestation efforts are strong and vibrant. We own tree nurseries in communities. We have multiple replanting and reforestation efforts that are going on within the various communities all over Ontario.
For every tree we cut, we plant 3.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's where the sustainability comes in on the forest. And if us being in the forestry industry, in the business, if we don't do that, we don't have a business. So why would we not be doing that? Because that is our business.
Well, I got a chart here, Tom. You asked me why would we not plant 3 for every one we cut down? When will Ontario harvest its last tree? All right, look at this chart. Let's start right at the bottom there with that tiny blue dot.
That's right.
That's what you harvest.
Annually.
Annually.
Yes.
So
less than 1% of the forest is harvested annually in Ontario.
Right. And as you go out to the larger concentric circles here, we can see that as a percentage of all of Ontario's forests, which is the biggest circle there, 71 million hectares of forest, it's a very tiny amount.
Very tiny.
So some people will ask the question, do you really need to be replanting when you're barely touching the forest as it is right now? Maybe it's just go, baby, go. As they said in the States, drill, baby, drill.
But that's not how we operate. We manage these forests so that we have the future for everyone's children and generations to come. And that's why we do that, because even though it's a very small portion of the big picture, we are the ones that are supposed to be looking after Ontario forests, and that's what we do.
How about you?
I absolutely agree with Tom. The other thing to always remember too is that we are harvesting a very, very small amount of Ontario's forest. But the benefit that is accrued from that small amount of harvesting is so great. When you look at about 57,000 direct jobs working in the forestry industry in Ontario, that's 57,000 families in Ontario. And I think it's about 170,000 indirect jobs. That's a lot of families, and primarily in northern and rural Ontario, where there really aren't a whole lot of other options. And these are good paying year-round jobs.
How much?
How much do they pay?
Yeah. Give me a range.
I don't know. Most places, I would say, like, it's not uncommon to make $20 an hour doing relatively simple labor at a sawmill. Yeah. It's not uncommon to make more than that working at a pulp mill.
Trades.
Yeah, skilled trades.
Skilled trades make a lot more than that.
So, and you have to remember that the options in a lot of the other communities are things like the tourism or recreation industries, which are generally very seasonality based. So you often have work for 6 months of the year, and then you're on unemployment for 6 months of the year. Right. That's a non-starter for a lot of people.
What's Building Up?
So Building Up is a nonprofit social enterprise, and we think of ourselves as a social contractor. So we go out and get construction business just like any other company would. But what's different about it is that our workforce is made out of folks that are going through a training program. So we use these projects to fund a training and employment program for folks like my good buddy Calvin over there and other folks that weren't necessarily born with opportunities that allowed them to get that head start on their own and just needed a little push.
And what are you building up?
We're building up humans, we're building up the city, we're building up ourselves as people that work in this organization. And
what kind of buildings, for example?
Yeah, so we work mostly in affordable housing buildings, and we generally do water efficiency retrofits. So what we'll do is we go in, we change all the toilets, all the shower heads, all the faucet aerators to new ones that'll save the building a ton of money on their bills and a ton of water. And that those savings give us the business in the first place, right? A building will say, yeah, I'd rather pay $300 now for a new toilet and save $200 a year for the rest of this toilet's life.
Let's get a bit of Calvin's story.
Yeah, for
How
sure.
did you find out about this in the first place?
Well, actually, I heard about building up to a friend, right? Because I was going through a situation at the time, right? And I was speaking to my friend about my situation, and she actually went online and she looked up some stuff, a program, right? And she came across building up, right? And she told me about it, and I did my resume, right? I got accepted by them to come in and do an interview, right?
So you came in for the interview?
They came in for an interview.
How did that go?
It was wonderful, you know. I remember the day when I go in to do the interview, right? I actually cried before I go in, because just the opportunity I got, right? Because I was going through a really tough time.
Calvin was one of 150 people
that
came out that day for those jobs.
For how many jobs?
For 7 spots.
Oh my gosh, you got one of 7 spots out of 150 applicants.
Right. And I'm grateful, you know, because to me, it gave me a chance, right? Because I'm from Jamaica and I'm an immigrant, right? And, you know, I wasn't born here, right? So it gave me a chance to start a life.
We're structured as a 4-month employment term. So folks come with us, they're with us for 4 months. After that, we place them with apprenticeships and jobs in the trades. So we have a person full-time that works with the unions and different employers that's going to take these people on. And what we tell them is, you know, Calvin just spent 4 months showing up to work every day on time. He came here, he worked hard, he was putting in toilets all day. You know, he was getting in there, working hard, working in a team of 8 people, all new to the trades, finding a way to work together and get a job done. Like the hardest thing for these folks in the trades to find is reliable people that are interested in the trades. And that's exactly what Calvin proved he was when he was with Building Up, right? So if you've got Calvin walking in your door versus someone else that you have no background on, why wouldn't you hire Calvin?
Kirsten, let's find out about you. Good Foot Delivery, what is that?
Good Foot Delivery is a local courier service in Toronto. We deliver packages by courier, by TTC and by foot all over the GTA. We hire people with developmental disabilities to be our couriers and work within our organization.
So I presume this means like not by bicycle, not by motorcycle, not by car.
No.
TTC or on foot.
Yes, Good Foot.
And the significance of that is what?
Well, I think mainly it was my brother and I started it together 6 years ago, and certainly he wasn't the type of person who could be a bike courier, but it seemed very accessible to anybody, and as a startup, using the TTC was one of the most affordable ways to get going, and it just sort of blossomed into being something that many people can do, and a skill that many people don't have, which is navigating the system and being able to get around.
You just referenced your brother.
Yes.
Your brother has what?
Well, he's got developmental disabilities. It's a very large spectrum, and I would say it'd be more of what they call a silent disability at the time. He hasn't been re-diagnosed since probably the early 90s, but very high functioning, something that you wouldn't necessarily see.
How old is he now?
He's 43.
And he is one of your Good Foot people?
He is co-founder, and he works with us at Good Foot, yeah. We have over 30 people now working for us. Mm-hmm.
How easy or difficult is it for you to find people who fit the profile of your organization's mission statement?
Well, I mean, it's not difficult at all. Since the day we started and word got out about us, we've had parents and candidates contact us. We've had stacks of resumes over the past 6 years. This year alone, we've received over 150, and we've vetted down to 36. There's a lot of people out there that can't really get a job, and this particular community aren't people that maybe can work full time every day. Some of them can, some of them can't. They need flexibility. This service or this job gives them the ability to be able to work in a way that works for them and in a community that understands what they're up against, and to a clientele that has made a commitment to a partnership with our business and understands the importance of breaking down stigma So it's just gotten out there, and the word's gotten out there that this is a great place to work.
Where did you get the notion of telling Toronto's story through a single school?
It really began in the most prosaic of ways. My daughter attended Clinton School, and I was asked to participate in the 125th anniversary. And like most parents at the school, I had a vague sense that it had a long, rich history, that it was a gateway for immigrant kids of all sorts. But I didn't really know much about it until I began looking more carefully at it in the context of this 125th anniversary, and began to discover that in fact, it told a story of Toronto, indeed perhaps even of Canada, in its own local way.
Well, let's go back and tell some of that story. The school goes back to 1888. What was the student body like back then?
Student body was, Toronto began to move west. 1880 was a crucial moment because that's when the college car crossed Bathurst Street. So all of a sudden you had the possibility to build houses and for a middle-class population largely to move in. What were they? Mainly Anglo-Saxon, Irish. Lots actually were immigrants, were new to the country, but Toronto had become this really dynamic center both for manufacturing and agricultural stuff as well as service. And so it was calling for lots and lots of different people, but mainly Anglo-Saxon until the end of the First World War.
End of the First World War, it becomes a much more of a magnet for immigrant students?
And then it changed. In 1918, there was a series on the local public schools in Toronto that appeared in the Star Weekly. And the fellow who wrote it said that at that point it was largely a British stock with maybe 5% Hebrew students. By the end of the 20s, 60% of the school was Jewish. So there was a very, very dramatic change and increase at that point in the number of Jewish students, which is why I end up calling it that first wave Jewish Clinton.
It's interesting the tension and the dynamic that created, being a significant Jewish school in what was then pretty waspy Ontario. And to that end, I want to read an excerpt of the book because part of the charter that schools had to live up to at the time was to, teach students how to live in a democratic society based on the Christian ideal. So here we go. The tension created by this way of defining the school's mission came to a head in the 1940s when Ontario's Premier George Drew promulgated regulations that required every public school in Ontario to teach religion and that provided lesson plans that conveyed the message that the Jews were responsible for killing Jesus. How did the Jewish student body and its parents deal with that?
So this is a remarkable story. I mean, you have to understand, George Drew's, they became known as the Drew Regulations. Like Bill Davis, he was both Premier and Minister of Education, required 2 half-hour periods of instruction per week for every child in Ontario school, grades 1 through 8. And as I say in the book, and as you've just read, the narrative was pretty clear from the syllabus. Because of course, teachers said, we know how to teach math, we know how to teach science, but no one taught us how to teach religion. So the Ministry of Education provided these workbooks, basically, which provided all sorts of hints. And the narrative was, Jews killed Jesus. How did Clinton deal with it? Well, there were 3 major Jewish schools in downtown Toronto: Clinton, Lansdowne, and King Edward. And the Canadian Jewish Congress decided to find that out for themselves. So they brought together some Jewish teachers from all of those schools and discovered that, in fact, at all of the schools, they basically just took a pass. There was, as one put it, a gentleman's agreement that they just wouldn't actually go down that path. And the teacher from Clinton said, we knew that it would create such a furor with parents that there was just no way the principal was going to go through with it.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, May 26, 2017. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety on our website, that's tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, And thanks to our nightly Twitter live stream on our Periscope page. That's periscope.tv/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.